What's up, y'all? It's your boy JTMM, aka JustTenMoreMinutes, aka the Freakin 10. We are back with more Sabaton history. I want to thank y'all for the comments on the new layout. I think it does look cleaner, you know, coming from a Twitch world where you have those types of backgrounds to separate everything. You know, was something I was used to, but the more and more that I've done reactions over time, it felt very distracting. And so I wanted to just do away with that and try this, and y'all have given it great reviews, so I'm just one I'm gonna stick with. Now, with that being said, Resistant Bite is a song that it was everything that I was hoping for it to be. It was both informative, and as far as the music, it gave it that dirty, gritty feel that you would feel in a Resistance, right? You are not fighting dirty in the sense of using anything, you know, as a weird tactic, but more just that your back's against the wall, you're going to fight and you're going to do whatever it takes. And that's what these guys did. You know, for 18 days to hold off the Blitzkrieg, it's just amazing to me. So I'm very interested to hear this more in depth. So with that being said, let's check it out.
The German Western Offensive in 1940 is often misrepresented as a walk in the park for the Germans.
Our song Resistant Bite proved that it wasn't.
War is coming swiftly, the border's closing in. We're a company of soldiers, they're 40 rifles strong. All alone, stand alone.
It was called the Phony War, and I suppose with some good reason. Although France and Great Britain had declared war on Nazi Germany in September 1939, after Germany's invasion of Poland, they had not launched any real assaults in the field, even after 7 months of inaction. And despite the German invasion of Denmark and Norway in April 1940, London and Paris still did not do so. Instead, they played for time, waiting for the Germans to one day run up against their defensive works. They gathered their strength. The old guard of generals and politicians thought this war would be like the last one, and since Germany lacked the economic reserves and the military apparatus to mirror their 1914 advance into Belgian and French territory, this one's outcome seemed already decided. But the Germans were well aware that with an enemy force ratio already stacked against them, they would ultimately lose any coming war of attrition. Instead, the German General Staff agreed that only a forceful offense would see them victorious. Generalleutnant Erich von Manstein and Generalleutnant Heinz Guderian came up with a daring plan, one that no one would expect them, or anyone, to pull off, to drive a panzer division through the heavily wooded hills of the Ardennes. This would ultimately split the French forces and crash through them and the Belgians at their weakest spot. German panzers and motorized units would race to cross the River Meuse and force an operational exploitation through the Ardennes, and even push through the first Belgian fortification lines at Martelange, and further forward between Libramont and Neufchâteau. For Belgian High Command, the Ardennes were not a major defensive factor, since the area is far in the southeast of the country and beyond the mighty River Meuse. Although there were several Belgian and French officers who spoke out against this defensive negligence, it was still generally agreed that an armored thrust through the Ardennes was simply impossible. Well, okay, not impossible, but tanks cannot go through the forest and must remain on the few roads. They would be sitting ducks, so the Germans would never do that. Instead, the Belgian military formed their defensive plans from their experiences in the Great War. They figured that spreading out their troops all along the border would see them overwhelmed by the stronger German advance. Also, the Belgian military endured several budget cuts in the interwar years and was unable to muster a large motorized or armored force. So they planned to concentrate the main mass of Belgian troops in redoubts in the northwestern part of the country, and another force between Liège and Namur, and wait for the Allies to come to their help. The Ardennes sector would only be lightly defended by the K groups under the command of General Maurice Kéart. Those groups consisted of a specialized screening force trained to move and fight in the heavily wooded forests. The Belgian Ardennes Light Infantry, Les Chasseurs Ardennais. Their primary mission was to act as a tripwire defense. They were not expected to stand up to the Germans since they were purely infantry without enough firepower to effectively stop armor. They were instead tasked to trigger demolition charges on bridges and on traffic routes. Upon receiving the order to withdraw, the Ardennes Light Infantry would disengage from the enemy and fall back to the main Belgian forces in the northwest of the country.
So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if the forest is that thick, and I wasn't aware it was that big, but if the forest was that thick, you wouldn't imagine that they'd be wanting to come through there. And so, yes, you would be stationing your troops along the northern side in much thicker, groups, I guess you could say. What's interesting to me is to put them down at that area without some sort of armor piercing but I mean, as they said, there were budget cuts, so maybe they just didn't have the ability to do that. But that just tells you it's one of those that when you see it and when you understand what these men are truly about to go up against, that's insane. So this goes back to the song of saying, I think it wasn't necessarily defying orders, but that they would essentially go against the withdrawal and stay and fight. Let's see what they say.
For the Belgians to preserve as many as possible of their units until the Allied reinforcements arrived made sense when looking back at Germany's 1914 Schlieffen Plan. But now they played right into von Manstein's hands. And his plan was scheduled down to the minute. The crossing of the River Meuse had to be achieved in under 4 days, or the French would realize it was the main attack, and they'd bring in enough forces to collapse it like a house of cards. On May 10th, as the first German forces crossed the Luxembourg border and disarmed the surprised border guards, the clock began ticking.
Fight all 18 days of battles, no one's on our side. You will fight for all until the bullets are gone.
Not even 3 hours later, the first reconnaissance units of the 1st German Panzer Division were rapidly pushing over the River Our and were closing in on Martelange behind the Belgian border. Armored reconnaissance cars and motorcycle companies were putting the pedal to the metal, trying to secure bridges and traffic hubs. But when they reached the outskirts of Martelange, the bridges were already destroyed, and they came under small arms fire from nearby defenders, small groups of the Chasseurs Ardennais, firing from well-camouflaged positions. Scouting ahead, the Germans spotted fortified pillboxes, tank barriers, and other obstacles, aimed at delaying the main German force, while at least one powerful Belgian T-13, which would have made short work of the armored cars, was patrolling nearby. Hard-pressed for every minute, and with little choice left, the German commander ordered the motorcycle companies to dismount and take the Belgian positions on a hill overlooking Martelange. Armed only with machine guns, the men charged in a suicidal frontal move across the slopes towards the Belgian defenders. But the Belgian light infantry was totally caught off guard and surrendered or withdrew without any chance of resistance. From Martelange onwards, the Germans pushed further to the west, through the valley of the Sauer River. That valley leads to the village of Boudange, at whose end a large hill rose, surrounded by the rivers Sauer and Bassel, like the moat of a castle, right? And on that hill, Major Maurice Bricard, in command of the 5th Company of the Ardennes Light Infantry, was growing concerned.
Ardennes, the ground is burning, and Rommel is at hand. As the blitzkrieg's pushing harder, the war is all around, all around.
It's interesting. I was sitting here watching and I was thinking about it and creating this image in my head of these discussions to where they're sitting there talking about having to have it down to a precise minute, right? Losing the time knowing, this is what we want to accomplish by X time because of the communication that could happen between countries. I mean, totally catching them off guard. So now I'm interested to see how this, because that's kind of the top that they were looking at, right? Where they were wanting to split them. So now what are we talking about with the South?
Reports were flooding in of fighting all through the Ardennes, but nothing was very specific. He had faith in his troops, who were veterans of the area and, like all chasseurs, knew how to fight with small unit tactics. Armed with modern 35-36 Mauser rifles and the Model 30 light machine gun, their marksmen could hold their own against just about any enemy troops. Looking down from the hill to the valley, they were also in a fairly good position to use their rifle grenades. They fought everywhere, shooting from behind trees and from on the move, trying to throw the Germans off their precious timetable. The first panzers were held up by the blown bridges and other barriers in Martelange, but the motorcycle companies moved forward down the valley towards Boudange. Spotting the Belgian defenses, they tried to repeat the same trick twice and rush the defenders by surprise, but without success this time. One of Bricart's combat patrols spotted the advancing Germans in the undergrowth, and after a quick exchange of surprised looks and cracking rifle shots, alarmed the others in the hills. Any further advance by the Germans was met with fierce resistance. Every time a field gray uniform was spotted, it was immediately pinned down with accurate rifle and machine gun fire. Bricart was on the phone, trying to reach his headquarters, asking for further orders. But no answer came. The line was dead. Cut by German paratroopers working in the Belgian rear. Hermann Goering, Luftwaffe commander and Germany's favorite medal collector, sought to speed up the breaking of the Belgian border defenses by sending in German soldiers by glider to attack the Belgian communication lines in the rear and spread chaos and confusion. Some had successfully landed near Virti and cut local telephone lines and blocked the main roads. No messenger could get through to Bricart.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that part of it. Man, so literally sending in troops just to destroy the communications, which makes sense. But then when you think about it, right, I mean, how do you plan for all of that? How do you plan to defend that? You only have so many troops. Wow.
But according to plan, the Ardennes Light Infantry was retreating all along the border. Their headquarters in Neufchâteau sent out orders to disengage immediately. Those orders did not reach Bricart. Unaware of what was going on in his rear, Bricart's 5th Company held on to their last order: hold the border. True to their credo, resist et mort, they would resist and bite like the boars they were. All afternoon, the men of the 5th Company held out in their trenches and pillboxes, firing rifles and machine guns into the German attackers, who were forced to withdraw time and again. And the Belgian defenders were hitting the Germans where it hurt them the most. They were messing with their timetable. Shooting with extraordinary precision, they made the Germans pay dearly for every approach. But they didn't even have anything heavier than grenade launchers. The Germans realized that Boudange was impossible to take with infantry alone. The pioneers were frantically working on restoring the bridges and bringing in artillery. First, the 3.7 centimeter anti-tank guns and 7.5 centimeter light infantry guns fired on the Boudange positions, but were unable to penetrate the heavy Ardennes blockhouses. The Belgians were just too well dug in. German radio operators called in heavier fire from a field howitzer battery from nearby Varnac. The shelling increased, and the shrapnel caused many bleeding wounds among the defenders, but still, they held. Only in the late afternoon, as 4 of the mighty 88mm guns were unleashed against the hill, did the Belgian defenses crumble. Still, in bitter house-to-house fighting, the Belgians fought on until they were finally forced to surrender. Boudange was taken around 7 p.m., 6 hours after the first shots were exchanged. In truth, the heroic stand of the Chasseurs Ardennais was not planned, nor was it even requested by high command. It was the result of a total communication breakdown caused by the German interference. And in a way, the German glider infantry attack had simply the opposite effect it was supposed to have. Had Bricart's men received the order to retreat, they would have disengaged long before the Germans could have reached Boudange. But the Chasseurs had stood true to their orders and held the border as long as they could.
You know, that... So yes, now I get it. It wasn't resisting an order. It was they never got the order. And just digging in and fighting and holding, hoping that the backup would come in. Wow. That's just... that's interesting in the sense of you don't get an order, but as a commander, at what point do you realize that things are going to take a turn? If you're picking up and asking for, and you realize the line is dead, do you realize that they probably have made that call, and so you take that order? Now, I'm not saying it's wrong. What they did was simply amazing, and they were going to be overrun, I think, regardless, just based on sheer numbers, right? I mean, you're talking about mere 40 versus, you know, tanks and troops and those, you know, different guns that they had, those 88 millimeter. That's nuts. But I don't want to question, obviously, you know, past is the past. But I'm curious what that thought process was if he realized the lines were dead, to stay and fight, meaning that, you know, hold it until they're on their way because they thought they were there. I don't know. That's the part that I truly question. Maybe they'll answer that. Yep. There's Joachim with the guitar.
Okay, so what inspired this? Because this is a bit unusual.
It's quite unusual, and it's a story we rarely had heard anything about. I mean, it was a fan, actually, in Belgium, who gave us the story in a Flemish document.
Okay, and do you speak or read Flemish?
Not a single word.
Okay.
So it became a bit complicated, and the person translated it for us, like, sort of, so that we could understand the story. But we could really never verify that it was absolutely true, because we couldn't find any other alternative sources for this exactly thing.
You know, I think it's kind of cool to write a song about a Belgian thing during warfare, because if there's one thing that I've learned from doing both the Great War and World War II, is there's a lot of cool Belgian war stories, actually.
There is, but they are usually older.
That's true. That is true. But there in the Great War, one of my favorite stories was the Belgian Armored Car Division. Now, the Belgian Armored Car Division did not fight in Belgium. Now, when they were invaded and stuff, these were volunteers that went to fight with Russia on the Eastern Front in like 1914, 15, 16. And now Belgium was still neutral. You know, we think of it, oh, they fought with Allies. They didn't. Belgium was, even though they were overrun and being defended by the Allies, it was still neutral. But these guys, the Belgian Armored Car Division, which is a bad name for a band, still. But they fought with the Russians, and there was an Olympic cyclist, a 4-time world boxing champion, was one of the Belgian Armored Car Division things. Thing is, after the revolution and stuff, they got stranded on the Eastern Front. They couldn't go to the West because there were still enemies in the World War. And of course, then now there's the Bolsheviks, and then the Russian Civil War started. So they had to go all the way around the world to get back to Belgium. After that. You should look them up. Hey, and somebody out there, write a song about the Belgian Armored Car Division.
Yeah, we have a lot of fans in Belgium. I mean, we considered Belgium our second home for a while.
Yeah.
It was probably the place outside of Sweden where it really took off, and we really had an established fan base that was coming very early.
Okay.
We were really lucky. We played a festival there called Grass Pop.
Okay.
The first time we ever played a big festival, but we were playing inside of a tent and nobody heard about us. So nobody should really go to the concert, actually. However, a horrible thunderstorm came.
Oh, lucky
which
you.
basically evacuated the entire festival and sent them into the tent just as we were supposed to play. So instead of playing for an empty tent, we
Yeah.
played for absolutely packed tent, and people were like, whoa, this band is
Wow.
actually really good. And it led us to the next year. We were upgraded to the main stage of the same festival.
Wow.
And since then, the relationship Sabaton and Belgium has steadily always been very, very solid. So a lot of Belgians over the years have also asked us to write songs about their history and stuff. And this one we found from World War II, which was a little bit like unexpected
Yeah.
of all the stories from Belgium to say.
No, but that's great. I had no idea that you had such a connection with Belgium. So wait, what year was this when with the festival? The first year that you
The
played?
first year we played the festival was in 2007.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. This is before like things with 40 to 1 took off and stuff.
Exactly.
Stuff like that. Okay.
We didn't go outside Sweden until 2005.
Right.
We didn't start to tour outside of Sweden. And we had visited Belgium once before, but once we had this opportunity to play on a festival, it was really changing something for us.
Well, that's really cool. Well, and thank you, Belgium, for that. Oh, and how about this? If you have any great Belgian military history stories, you know where to write them, right? It could come up
Down
on
here.
some future Sabaton albums. Maybe there's a whole album called Belgia. And it's only war stories of Belgian. You know, not saying no, right?
No, not saying no at all.
Okay, you get enough stories, maybe you'll do it. All right, well, I think that's about it for us for today, yeah?
That's it for today. Thank you everybody for watching.
See you next time on Sabaton History.
We take our bombs and fight. Fight on. The system do us right.
Thank you everybody for supporting us and watching these episodes every week. But we need a lot of more of you to support us. So become a subscriber of the channel and become a Patreon, because we really need your support to continue to do this every week so we can see each other every week, right? Thank you very much.
You know, this is one that I didn't pause a lot because normally I'll get, at least 3 pauses in because I never want it to seem like I just want to play it and not make any commentary and using that for a view. These stories actually do fascinate me. And I'm sitting here and thinking about that, just like I said, with the communication line broken, the general's thought process. And after I said that, I was sitting there watching and thinking about it. I was like, if the message doesn't come, then you stay with the original, and that's what they did. So, I was kind of questioning at first, but then the more I thought about it, no, you stay and hold because you don't know what that outside is. So they did exactly that, and they did it well. That's the part that just, you think about being trampled with those guns that they had, that they were brought in, and they were getting the shrapnel wounds, and they were getting, just continuously bombarded because, again, they're thinking they're facing this huge battalion. And yet they show up and it's, a handful of soldiers. And I can only imagine, and I said this in the comments, I think, to Mia, can you imagine being those German officers that were telling your troops to withdraw over and over, for those 18 days, realizing you were held off by 40 people? That had to be freaking embarrassing. I too, if I was a Belgian in that platoon and they, where are the rest of you? This is it. Just to watch that look on their face when they realized that they were just, for lack of a better term, dominated for 18 days up until the end and being held off. That look had to be priceless to those guys and worth every bit. Now, I don't know what those guys' fates were, if most of them were killed or if they were just taken prisoner and then released later. They didn't really touch on it. But man, can you just imagine the look on those German officers' faces? That would have been epic. Those faces would have been memes today. Let's face it. If those would have been captured back then, those would have been memes. 100%. Oh, that was a good episode. I like that one. I'm going to start catching up on the past history episodes. Father is one of them. The other one is Attack of the Dead Men. Those are, I think, the two oldest ones that I've done that I need to catch up on, and then more. So there will be ones that I sprinkle throughout as I'm doing just recording after recording after recording. So look for those. Until then, I'll see you on the next one. I'm JTMM. Like, subscribe, and share, and all that other stuff that we're supposed to say as content creators. I'll see y'all next time. I'm out.